If you're like us, you're probably tired of flipping through outdated and expensive regulation books and struggling to understand the rule or guidance you're after. eRigs is the first web and mobile app version of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations, helping fleets of all types and sizes better access and understand their regulatory obligations. eRigs is always up to date and allows fleet safety professionals to not only read the rules, but also dig into FMCSA guidance and learn more about complex regulatory topics from industry experts. Highlight, bookmark, and take detailed notes right from the app and access them on any of your devices. And easily share a digital version of the regulations with your drivers so that they too can better understand the rules. eRigs was developed by safety professionals for safety professionals. Try it out for free at erigs.app. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 41 of Trucksafe Live, the show where we and our guests tackle the hot button issues impacting highway transportation. I'm Brandon, Trucksafe, Childress Law, both of which are dedicated to helping motor carriers develop and maintain cutting-edge safety programs. Got Brian Reynolds with me today. Brian, what's going on?
Good afternoon. How's everybody?
Well, it's just me here for now, so I'm doing well. Thanks for asking.
You are the everybody, so it's okay.
Yeah, I'm all that matters, right? Or so they say. How was your ride today? You got some riding in with your son?
Yeah, I got some time in before he deploys, so we took full advantage of him visiting Indiana, and we saw some of the southern part of the state this morning. So, yeah, it's been a good day. Chilly.
Chilly.
Yeah, it was cold this morning. Yeah, it was cold this morning, but it warmed up real nice and had a real good time. So, yeah, right on.
Good. Glad to hear it. So today's show, we are talking about Clearinghouse Phase 2, the gift that keeps on giving in the Clearinghouse.
Man, I tell you, yeah, I know we're going to get into this, but boy, I'm really curious to see what the impact is going to be once this goes into effect.
Yeah, it's going to have some ripple effects, I fear. So that's what we'll get into here in a little bit. Before we do that, a few things here. First up, I want to thank the sponsor of today's show, which is Taking the Higher Road, a Legacy Builders and FreightWaves production. Taking the Higher Road is a special podcast dedicated to addressing the trucking industry's greatest challenges, driver recruiting, retention, and compliance. Each week, host Jeremy Raymer, 20-year industry veteran and founder of Driver Reach and Legacy Builders, interviews industry experts and thought leaders who bring their insights to the driver life cycle. Be sure to check them out wherever you get your podcasts. So thanks to Taking the Higher Road. Really appreciate it. If you're here with us live, say hey in the comments so we know who's here with us. And yeah, appreciate you being here. We took a few weeks off there. We had some technical problems with our last show, so we had to abandon that one. So sorry for that, but we're back at it. And then we had our boot camp, which I want to talk a little bit about here, a little recap on the boot camp, which went really well a couple weeks ago. So back in the seat here and looking forward to it. Before we get into our main topics today, a few things going on at Trucksafe that we should mention. First up, you saw the intro at the beginning for eRigs. If you haven't already checked that out, be sure to do so over at erigs.app. eRigs is the first app-based digital version of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations that we at Trucksafe developed over the last several years to help fleets and drivers not only access an always up-to-date version of the regulations, but also access to cutting-edge educational content right alongside the regulations. So, and also the FMCSA's guidance. So check that out. You can try it for free over at erigs.app.
And before you keep rolling, the eRigs, when we did have boot camp a week or so ago, and there would be a question that came up. It was it was very easy to get on there, find the answer, and instead of going through the ECFRs or going through the Green Book or something like that, it was very intuitive, and it was a big help when we were going through that process.
Yeah, we did that a couple times. We just pulled up the search on eRegs, searched for what term we were looking for, and had the regulation right there on hand. So, yeah, not to toot our own horn, but very useful tool. So check that out over at eregs.app. Also, want to mention our Trucksafe Fleet Compliance Network. If you're not a member of this, I recommend you join it. It's free to join. You can join over at trucksafenetwork.com. This is a dedicated space for safety professionals, fleet safety professionals, to gather together, learn from one another, ask questions, and also access all of our DOT-related content, including our courses, our videos, our webinars. In fact, we are in the middle still of a 7-part webinar series on how to improve your CSA scores if you're a fleet. I think we've done 5 of the 7. We got 2 more to go. So be on the lookout for announcements about those final 2 episodes of our webinar series. But yeah, we'd love to have you over at the Trucksafe Network. Again, just a great space to be able to ask questions and have. We've got hundreds of safety professionals in there now. Somebody will chime in, give you their thoughts, and we're in there constantly as well. So hope to see you there. And then our courses, last thing I'll mention about us, well, actually 2 more things. So our courses, you can always check out our online courses for DOT safety managers and also for drivers over at trucksafeacademy.com. We've got in-depth, hours-long video-based courses that you could take at your convenience, all about DOT safety regulations, driver qualification, hours of service, vehicle maintenance, all of those fun topics we baked into our comprehensive courses, and you can find those, again, trucksafeacademy.com. All right, I want to mention 2 additional services because this is actually coming out of the boot camp, and then we'll do a little recap on the boot camp. We announced 2 new services that we at Trucksafe are going to be offering to fleets here in the coming months and years. One of which is what we are calling our Trucksafe micro audits and our Trucksafe Bootcamp on the road. So, Brian, you want to give them a little preview of the micro audits, what those will entail?
Sure. This is just a real quick look under the hood. It can be something that we can do virtually. We don't have to come and sit in your office and look at 3 or 4 DQ files, 3 or 4 maintenance files, look at a couple drivers, 30 days worth of logs or something, something along those lines. And it typically shows us if there's smoke, there's fire. If we find something in those 2, it's probably something that we're going to see beyond that. So I think that it's a quick, kind of painless, doesn't take a lot of time on the safety manager's part to gather a ton of information to be able to upload it to us and for us to review it. So I think that that's a great way, because I think what happens, especially with a mock audit, is when we do a mock audit, it's the full percentages that the FMCSA would look for in a real audit. And that takes some time to get all that information together. So this will be much quicker, much easier, but I think you could glean a sense of what you're facing when it comes to your fleet compliance.
Yeah, I mean, it's a sanity check. And so, yeah, we'll take a look at all those key indicators of a compliant fleet, and we will give you a detailed report. That's the other big thing coming out of those micro audits. You'll get a very detailed report showing, your where you're at with all of your safety metrics, your CSA scores, your out of service rates, your ISS score. We'll look at common trends in your violation data, and then everything that we find in the micro audit will all be written up in a nice report. But more than that, what's the most important part of these is going to be recommendations for how you can close any gaps that we happen to find, if any. And spoiler alert, we will probably find some, because I don't think I've ever done a mock audit where I haven't found at least some violations. So, but yeah, this is all about being proactive. We think it's a good way for fleets to be proactive. So we're excited about that. Get in contact with us if you're interested in that. And then also boot camp on the road. So just want to do a quick recap of boot camp, and then we'll talk about boot camp on the road. So we held our fleet compliance boot camp. This is our third boot camp that we have held over the last couple of years. We did this one in Indianapolis a couple weeks ago. We had about 80 or so in attendance. Great turnout. We were completely packed in that room, which was great to see. And we spent 2 full days of talking about nothing but DOT compliance. So we hit on all of those major topics and got great feedback from it. So a lot of folks asking a lot of great questions. That's really how we try and structure our boot camp, is we want it to be more of a conversation than just a thing where we're up there talking the whole time. So we just let people ask questions throughout the whole thing, and we got a ton of questions and got a lot of answers out there. So I think it went well. Like I said, a lot of great feedback, had a good reception one of the evenings. So, that's my overall take on it. Brian, your thoughts on it?
I think it's great that in 2 years we've outgrown 2 rooms. So that's a nice thing going forward. And like you said, being able to ask those questions, and there are some very, very intelligent people in that room, not just us. There was some great minds in that room, and being able to pull that from your peers and then talk to them about it during the breaks, during lunch, during the reception. It's always just a great event.
Yeah, we had attendees there that have been in a DOT safety director role for decades, who were able to chime in on all of the topics and give their experience. We had fleet directors from humongous fleets all the way down to fleets of 10 or so trucks, and it was just a great opportunity to get to know all those folks and spend some time with them. So appreciate everybody that showed up for that. And if you're interested in attending one of those, we're going to try and do at least one of them every year. So best place to keep up to date of when we make announcements on our next ones would be our newsletter. So you can join that over at www.trucksafe.com/subscribe, and that will put you on our newsletter, and then be on the lookout for announcements for that. And kind of along those lines, the other thing kind of coming out of this boot camp and the last ones seems to be an interest from various groups, whether it be a carrier itself or insurance groups or other risk professionals wanting to put on like one of these private boot camp for their own internal staff, for a carrier, maybe for their own internal safety team. If you're an insurance group, for your own, insurance brokers or whoever you got working for you. We've got a couple of those scheduled already, and so we wanted to make that a broader offering. So if you ever have any interest in kind of a private boot camp, DOT compliance boot camp, where we come in and we go into depth on all of these various DOT compliance topics, again, get in touch with us. We're going to start offering that as a service. So looking forward to that. All right.
But and don't forget, it can be a day or it can be a day and a half. It just depends on, the amount of people you want. And we put some exercises in there, and those exercises can be modified to save some time. But, it can be a one day or a day and a half type session, whichever you prefer.
Yeah, we'll make it work for your schedule, and
Sure.
We're looking forward to it. So again, get in contact with us if you're interested in that, and maybe Brian and I will come out to visit you. I'll have that to look forward to. All right, enough about us. That was a lot of sales bitch, and I hate doing that. So moving on to some industry news before we get into the main topic, which again is the Clearinghouse Phase 2. I saw a couple of news articles come through that I wanted to at least touch on to make sure everybody's up to date on these things. First one I saw come through was an article in Transport Topics earlier was last week, titled FMCSA Targets Falsified ELD Records in New Approach. Article says, faced with evolving tactics to bypass hours of service rules, Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration is taking steps to combat electronic logging device fraud. The agency is launching a multi-pronged approach to address what it describes as a moving target. And then the article gets into kind of what's prompting this particular move by FMCSA. Says the agency cited NTSB concerns, the National Transportation Safety Board, with so-called ghost drivers, as well as drivers utilizing multiple ELD accounts, and it's exploring various technological requirements to target those specific issues. And it seems like, I can't remember if it talks about this in the article, but there was a recent NTSB investigation. So the NTSB, for those who aren't familiar with it, is a federal agency that goes and investigates serious transportation-related accidents. They don't have an enforcement arm, so that it's not like they're imposing fines or anything. Their sole mission is to investigate the root cause of those types of accidents across modes. So it's not just truck accidents; it's also pipeline accidents, and most often it would be airline accidents. Any airplane crash, the NTSB is the one that goes and investigates. But this particular investigation was, I think it was a bus crash, maybe, I think so, and
it was a truck that hit a party bus in Illinois.
That's right, truck that hit a party bus, and one of the findings from that NTSB report was that allegedly the bus company, was it the bus company or it was the truck company, I think, had set up multiple what they call ghost accounts on the ELDs so that drivers could potentially get around their hours of service restrictions by logging out of their account and then into one of these ghost accounts and continuing along their way, making it look as if they had available hours when they really didn't. And this is a pretty unfortunately common occurrence. We've seen it in our own work over the years at some fleets, and it's just bad news all around. And certainly if you get into one of these bad accidents, it's going to be devastating to your fleet. So point is, if you're doing this, stop doing it immediately, obviously. But because it has become such a common occurrence, the FMCSA is now wise to it, and it looks like they're going to start tackling it. How they're going to tackle it, I don't know. Any thoughts on that, Brian?
Well, it was a major point of conversation, and I know we're going to get into the CVSA conference here in a minute, but boy, that was a major conversation there. And, they talked about how ELD fraud is completely rampant. There's so much of this going on, and it only took a matter of time for folks to figure out, okay, this is the new law. Now, how do we circumvent it? And they've done a pretty good job of it. I know there was a company shut down. It's been a couple years ago, but they were issuing their drivers 2 ELDs in orientation.
Like physical devices?
Physical devices.
Wow.
And then, they could recreate the backstory.
It's a little bit cheaper when you could just give them 2 paper logbooks. Now you got to buy 2 ELD devices. Crazy.
Yeah, at the time, this was, like I said, a few years ago when freight was paying really, really well. And the more they could turn, the more everybody could make. And that's what they were doing. So, yeah, it needs to be somehow attacked, but yeah, I'm not sure how they're going to do it.
Yeah, I mean, the bad actors are going to be the bad actors. If we shut this practice down, they're going to come up with something new. But what else can you do? You got to get control of the issues. You got to start closing the gaps. If you're the FMCSA, that is your job after all. And so we'll have to see how it plays out. I don't know if it will be in the form of a rulemaking where they're going to change up the ELD rules. I mean, the ELD rules already prohibit you as a carrier from doing these types of things. So I don't know what much more they can do other than maybe be a little more aggressive in the enforcement of it. So we'll have to wait and see. So be on the lookout for that. Just wanted to note that came out recently. The other thing I want to note that's coming up here soon is FMCSA's Registration Modernization Stakeholder Day 3. FMCSA, if you haven't heard already, is working to update their DOT registration system, their online system that fleets use to either register for a new U.S. DOT number or update your existing DOT number. So they've been holding some listening sessions and stuff like that recently, but they've got another one coming up Monday, October 21st from 1 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time. And they are inviting the industry to take part in this. I know I registered to attend virtually. They have some space for people to attend in Washington D.C. in person if you wanted to do that, but then they also are doing a virtual session as well where I think they're going to give like a sneak peek of what this looks like and that type of stuff. So it'll be interesting. Their existing unified registration system (URS) has been in place for several years now, and it is definitely showing its age. It's pretty antiquated. So looking forward to what they're going to do with this new registration system. A big part of this is driven by the pretty rampant fraud that we are seeing more and more of. In terms of carriers, nefarious actors setting up carriers to engage in like double brokering and stuff like that. So ostensibly, this new system is going to tackle that, and also carriers like using like PO boxes and stuff like that rather than a physical address when they're registering their USDOT number. So hopefully this new system will tackle all of those things. But if you're interested in seeing what it might look like or talking with the FMCSA folks, be sure to register for this. You can do so. I think if you just go to FMCSA's main website, they have a link so that you can register for this. So check that out if you are interested.
Well, and both of these things that we just talked about, the plaintiff's bar preys on both of those things. And it is in our best interest to actually work with the FMCSA as much as we can to try to close those loopholes, because eventually we're all going to pay for it, whether it's insurance rates, whether it's crash litigation, numerous other things. We've got to get these types of things under control just for that reason.
Yeah. Yeah, so clearly FMCSA has its hands full with all of the fraud in various aspects of regulated trucking, and they are, to their credit, they seem to be taking steps to curb some of this fraud. Whether it will be successful or not, we're going to have to wait and see. It's also kind of bad timing because we're right in the middle of a election cycle, and so presumably if a new party takes office here come November 2024, some of the FMCSA staff will turn over and we'll get some new folks installed, and those new folks are going to have to be brought up to speed on everything that's going on. And so it would not surprise me if over the next several months here we don't see a whole lot of activity in terms of progression on existing rulemakings or some of these other initiatives that they've got going on. So I think we just have to expect, given the timing of this, that some of these things are going to take a while, which is, we're already seeing that with some of the other rulemakings that we've been waiting, it seems like forever for them to take effect. Things like changes to the safety measurement system and the CSA scoring. They proposed that in early 2023, I think, and we still haven't had that take effect. So we're still waiting on a lot of things, and I fear that we're going to be waiting quite a bit longer for them to move forward with many of these things. With that, let's talk a little bit about CVSA. So it's been a few weeks ago now that you attended, Brian, the CVSA, what is it, their annual meeting out in Montana? Is it Montana?
This one's in Montana, whichever basically head of the Highway Patrol Commercial Vehicle Division, whoever's the chairman of the CVSA, his state hosts the conference. So yes, we were in Montana this year. Fantastic. Quite honestly, the first time I'd ever attended one, and it's incredible to be in a room with or be in a place where of the 900 people that registered, 650, 700 of them are law enforcement, and hearing their issues and how they want to do the right thing and how they aim to do it, but they're semi-limited on what they can push through. I think that, anything that's a rulemaking, they're not a rulemaking force. So they can't do that. But when you talk about things like personal conveyance, okay, where there really is no regulation on it, they can have a huge impact there. And, um, you know, like I said, with some of the big topics were, because I was in the driver part of it, I wasn't in the vehicle part of it. And the vehicle part of it, those meetings really go a lot to the mechanical pieces that they're going to find out of service. That determines what the out of service regulation is going to be. As far as the driver and traffic, we talked a lot about the level 8 inspections that could be coming. And as long
For those who
as
aren't familiar with that, what is the level 8 inspection?
level 8 is going to be an electronic inspection, they're testing it. I think there's about 6 states that are involved now, and half a dozen carriers that, as they roll through the pre-pass or DriveWise site, it's pulling not just the regulation or the registration information, but it's pulling information on the equipment. Eventually, they want to be able to tap it into the ELD to identify the driver and identify the hours of service. And where this is important is, as long as brokers are using the SMS as a reason to either accept or deny carriers because they don't have enough inspection data, this will give those carriers the opportunity to increase the amount of inspection data in there, because these level 8s will count.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of conversation there. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think that's the silver lining. There is obviously lots of concerns that a lot of fleets have about those inspections. Namely, I think you mentioned PC. One of the questions a client raised to me, and I had the same question. It's like, PC, so subjective. And it usually takes cross-referencing a driver's logs with supporting documents like fuel records and stuff like that to sniff out a illegitimate use of personal conveyance. It's like, how are you going to do that with electronically transmitted logs where you're not going to be the law enforcement is not going to receive supporting documents? So how are you going to even sniff out a illegitimate use of personal conveyance with the logs alone? So it's questions like that I still have for sure.
Right. And I honestly don't think that that's going to be how deep they'll get into it. I think they're going to use the hours of service is to who's actually driving that truck. Mm-hmm. And are they, they'll be able to pull their driver's license information, their medical card information, things like that. That'll be the items that are pulled. Now, if something can flag super quick on the hours of service, I think we're pretty far down the road away from that at this point, but it's starting to happen, and they're excited about it because they're all super short-staffed. They really are. There's a lot of money that's been taken away from them. That's why good luck getting a voluntary inspection.
Yeah.
Because there's actually an operational policy that they pointed out that forbids inspectors from doing that. Because
they don't get any money for those, right? So I think that's one of the
reasons.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that was the 2 reasons. One, it's not MCSAP approved, and they just don't have people to do it.
Yeah, so to put this issue to bed, because we get this question so frequently from clients and others, hey, can we just go get a volunteer for an inspection so that we can satisfy our brokers who are telling us we don't have enough inspection activity? We've told them for years that was a bad idea, and now it's not even possible anymore because FMCSA has told state law enforcement that they will not give them federal funding to conduct the voluntary inspections. And so it's just we saw this coming. The writing was on the wall for several months now. It's just not even a thing anymore. So brokers are going to have to figure something else out, or they're going to have to get the message that when you're telling fleets that you're not using them because they don't have enough inspection activity, you're thinking that it should be easy for them to just go get voluntary inspections. It's not a thing. So brokers need to get it through their head that the frequency of inspections is not a good indicator of whether this is somebody you should be doing business or not. There's just small fleets. There's nothing they can do about it to fix that. So it is what it is. So just keep that in mind. What else coming out of CVSA? Anything?
Great information about one of the heated arguments that happened was whether a driver that did not have a medical card, this was more or less for non-CDL drivers, but if they could produce it by the end of the inspection, some guys were okay with saying, okay, that wasn't a violation at all, while other folks were saying, okay, it's still a violation, it's just not an out of service violation. Yeah. So that was, and when these meetings happen, there's a list of topics that may have been going on since the spring meeting, and they are 8-9 hours long.
Yeah.
So, you get a lunch and you get a break, but it's talking about these types of things all day.
Yeah.
And it is an incredible opportunity for someone that's in industry to go and understand and listen to what the law enforcement side is dealing with. Yeah. And it does open your eyes some. It does, and all sections of trucking were represented. There was folks from major carriers, OIDA, vendors, just, it's not near as much as the other conferences because this one's aimed at law enforcement, but you definitely have a vested interest in what they have to say. So it's definitely worth going to, and it's definitely worth observing.
Yeah, and one topic I wanted to bring up, I haven't even told you about this article I found, but I think this came out today. I saw, and I know it has to do with the topic that I'm pretty sure you addressed at the CVSA meeting. The article is titled "FMCSA Will Delay Rear Impact Guard Label Inspection Enforcement." CVSA and other trucking groups shared concerns last month about carriers' inability to comply when the stickers falls off. So this has to do with a fairly recently announced requirement, which is as part, correct me if I get this wrong, Brian, but as part of the carrier's annual inspection requirement, or is it the driver inspection? It's the annual inspection.
Well, it's supposed to be both. It's supposed to be a driver supposed to verify that decal is on the rear impact guard during his pre-trip inspection. And then, yes, it is something that's supposed to be looked at during an annual inspection as well. And so,
these are stickers on the rear impact guards of trailers that are from the manufacturers that are supposed to be certifying that the rear impact guards meet the Federal Motor Vehicle safety standards that apply to those rear impact guards to prevent underride from rear end collisions, right?
Yeah, and I believe it's set at, don't quote me, but I believe the number was 45 miles per hour because this is coming to light because of that Wabash crash. And that trailer was tested or certified for 35, but the plaintiff's bar pushed very hard that there wasn't enough testing done. And it was successful in the area that they were in, or the jurisdiction that they were in. But yeah, these decals do fall off. I mean, they're set on the side, either on the back side of the bar or on the side upright, one of the side uprights. And I know that CVSA also had an issue with those decals as well, because through salt and grime and just daily use, they're coming off.
Yeah. Yeah, so according to this article, the FMCSA has agreed to delay enforcement of the rear impact guard manufacturer's label inspection requirement until December, which is not all that long of a delay, but a delay nonetheless, so a couple of months before they will begin enforcing the requirement that sticker be made part of your annual inspections and also your driver inspections. I wouldn't be surprised if we hear more on that from FMCSA as we get closer to December, so be on the lookout for that. Okay. Anything else from CVSA, or are we going to move on to Clearinghouse?
Well, that's kind of the process that they work through. What starts there, they get all the ducks in a row. They put together a proposal that goes to the FMCSA and says this is something that we want to do, and then the FMCSA can either approve or deny it, or send it back and say no, you need to change it. So it's not something that takes a rulemaking, or anything that has to go through Congress or any of that. This is something that, hey, this is something we want to enforce. Technically, the regulation's there. We can or can't. And the FMCSA says, yes, either do it, don't do it, or fix it and then do it.
Yeah. Speaking of enforcement, the other thing we should mention, we were hoping to get Rob on here with us today, but he's out working. He's actually been helping out with the emergency relief efforts in North Carolina and surrounding states from Hurricane Helene. He's been delivering some critical supplies down there, so we were hoping to get an update from him just to see what he's doing down there and what they need, if anything, and how people can help. But like I said, he's working, so he'll jump on if he's able to, but doesn't look like he's able to so far. But the thing I did want to mention for folks asking about this, the FMCSA occasionally issues what it calls emergency declarations or waivers, particularly in instances like this when there has been or there will be a significant weather event. We see this a lot with hurricanes and tornadoes and flooding and stuff like that, where the FMCSA will issue these waivers. They're usually temporary, and they usually offer fleets some reprieve from certain sections of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations, namely the hours of service regulations is the big one, for fleets and drivers that are aiding in the emergency relief efforts. And I just wanted to point out that you can always find these. If you just Google FMCSA emergency declarations, you'll find this page. You'll land on this page. And this has a list on the FMCSA's website of all of the current emergency declarations that they have issued. There are a couple right now that are in place. One of which is from Hurricane Helene that is currently effective and is scheduled to expire on October 27th. So you could pull that up and take a look at its terms. It'll tell you what regulations you're exempted from, and it will clarify that you're only exempt while you're directly assisting the emergency relief efforts. So be careful about that. You can't go down and help with the efforts and then go immediately into non-emergency work. That will cause some trouble if you try and do that. So just be aware of that. And then the other one I wanted to mention is one that's already in place from the state of Florida that is anticipating Hurricane Milton, which looks like it's going to be another pretty bad one, actually, that is going to hit later this week in October of 2024 if you're watching later. But anyway, this one became effective on 10/5 and is currently scheduled to expire not until December. But those are out there now, and you can find them on the FMCSA's website if you search for emergency declarations. So be sure to check that out if you haven't already.
Before we jump in, Brandon, go to Eastern Aviation's comment there. We can answer that real quick.
Whoops, wrong button. Let me make it a little bigger here. All right. What happens when you lose the sticker? So they're talking about the rear impact guard sticker we were just talking about. Do we go to the manufacturer to get another one to be in compliance?
Yeah, you sure have to, because they are VIN specific. So yes, you will have to get a sticker from the manufacturer.
Okay. Hopefully that's an easy process, because if not, your trailer's just out of service until you get that new sticker?
I don't know the answer to that. I think you could still run it. It would be a minor violation. And honestly, I can't remember if that violation carries points or not. So,
yeah, because usually, if it is part of the annual inspection, usually if you fail anything in the annual inspection, your vehicle has to be parked until that issue is resolved. So that seems like a potential problem. If that sticker alone causes an out of service condition from an annual inspection. But anyway, yeah, that's the solution for now, is to go to the manufacturer and get another sticker. Hopefully that's an easy process, but I kind of doubt that it is, if I had to guess. Okay, so we are here to talk about Clearinghouse, Clearinghouse Phase 2. So we put out an article about this on our website earlier. It was late last week. Everything you need to know about Clearinghouse Phase 2, which is scheduled to roll out on November 18th of 2024. This is going to be an important, a pretty significant change that's going to potentially cause a lot of CDL drivers to all of a sudden not have a CDL anymore. So it's important that you pay attention to this if you haven't been. It's not like this is a surprise. The FMCSA had proposed this, I think, several years ago now. It was always part of the FMCSA's clearinghouse plan. But just to kind of give a little backdrop to this, so the FMCSA's clearinghouse, Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse, has been in place since January of 2020. This is the central database that accumulates all drug and alcohol violation data for CDL drivers across the United States and makes that data available to employers of those drivers and subsequent employers of those drivers, and also law enforcement and other stakeholders, including state drivers licensing agencies. And the purpose of the database is to give visibility into situations when a particular CDL driver has violated the drug or alcohol testing rules in a way that renders them prohibited from operating a commercial motor vehicle, so that if I'm a subsequent employer of a driver, for example, if I've got driver John Doe, CDL driver John Doe that's applying to work for me, I have an obligation now since January of 2020 to run a query through the clearinghouse on that driver and to confirm that the driver is not in prohibited status due to a past drug or alcohol violation before I let him drive under my DOT number. And that's how the database is supposed to work. It works through reporting obligations. Folks who are involved in the drug and alcohol testing process for DOT drivers have to report violations to the system, and then that data is then in the system available for subsequent employers to query, and also, like I said, to law enforcement. If they're stopping CDL drivers for a roadside inspection, they could see if that driver's in prohibited status. The missing part that we've had missing since its implementation since 2020 is there's never been a mandate to this date, to today, for state driver's licensing agencies to automatically revoke a driver's CDL because of a prohibited status in the clearinghouse. But that's what's changing come November 18th. That gap will be closed. So right now, some states are already doing it, but many are not. If I'm a driver in a particular state that's not doing this already, let's say a driver in my state gets put in prohibited status due to a failed drug test. Right now, I have no obligation to automatically revoke their CDL, but they're still prohibited from operating a CDL-sized vehicle by virtue of that violation. So it creates the situation now where we've got potentially hundreds of thousands of drivers out on the roads right now who are in prohibited status in the clearinghouse because they violated the drug or alcohol testing rules, but their CDLs remain valid because the states have had no obligation to automatically revoke their CDLs. But come November 18th, 2024, they will have that obligation. So that's what's coming up. Go ahead, Brian. I'm going to pull up a chart here to look at.
Yeah, no, go ahead. I think that even when the states do this, it's going to be imperative for the motor carriers to go ahead and pull an MVR a day after, a couple days after, a week after, and double check if anybody's fallen through the cracks.
Yeah, and if you want to be even more proactive about it, clearly that's a good idea. And it's going to be presumably easier for carriers that are enrolled in some kind of a continuous license monitoring program platform. That platform is probably going to be busy on November 18th, I'd have to guess, because right now, pulling up the data here, let's take a look at this. So this,
Well,
go ahead.
yeah, sorry. Wouldn't the clearinghouse send out the email that, hey, somebody in the last 12 months, that email that they're sending out now, if the state downgraded their license, well, no, that wouldn't be on the
Well,
clearinghouse. That's
yeah.
on the
So
state licensing. Yeah.
no, your point is, hey, shouldn't carriers already know about this? Because the clearinghouse, since for the last year or so, has been sending out automated notifications anytime a driver who they have already run a query on gets put into prohibited status after they ran the query. That has been how the system has functioned over the last year. So if I'm a carrier that's doing the right thing with all of my drivers, which is to say I'm running the annual limited queries on all of my existing drivers, I should already be aware of whether any of my drivers are in prohibited status, and I already should have pulled them off of the road. But the problem is we have a lot of carriers that aren't using the clearinghouse correctly and may not even know what the clearinghouse is. And those are the ones that are going to be caught with their pants down if come November 18th, because all of a sudden, regardless of the fact that they're not using the clearinghouse, which is a violation in and of itself, now all of a sudden they're also going to have drivers who don't have a CDL anymore that they thought had a CDL. So they're the ones that are going to be hurting, because now they've got the double whammy. They're employing drivers who are in prohibited status in the clearinghouse, and now they're employing drivers that don't have a CDL because the states are going to yank those CDLs. So those are the ones I'm most concerned with. Carriers that have been doing the right thing, that have been running these queries, shouldn't really be all that surprised, but I think it is still a good idea for them, if they haven't run limited queries on their drivers recently within the past several months, it probably makes sense to go ahead and run a batch of limited queries on all of your drivers pretty close to November 18th, just in case, for whatever reason, one of the drivers slipped through the cracks and is in prohibited status. You can go ahead and get them off the road before their CDL is then downgraded. But then I agree with you, after November 8th or on November 8th, I'd probably wait until the night. Until the 19th, I would probably go ahead and run MVRs on all the drivers, or if they're in continuous license monitoring, that should fix the problem, to make sure that that deadline has not then caused any of my existing drivers to have lost their CDL. So you can kind of handle it on either side of that date, either before the date by running limited queries through the clearinghouse on all the drivers, seeing if any are in prohibited status, or after that date through MVRs to see if they have lost their CDLs because of a clearinghouse problem. Point is, you need to be proactive about this, because the last thing you want to do is to end up having even just one driver that has lost a CDL out there operating under your DOT number, because that's what the DOT considers a red flag violation. It's a very serious violation that they will take very seriously if they come in and audit you. So, yeah, for sure, be on the lookout for that. Just wanted to show you real quick the data from the clearinghouse. FMCSA publishes these reports pretty much every month. This is the latest one that's from their website. It's about a month old now. This data is as of September 1st, but these numbers continue to astonish me. You can see, if you're looking at the screen here, that since the implementation of the clearinghouse in 2020, over 263,000 CDL drivers have been reported to the clearinghouse for at least one drug or alcohol testing violation. But the more astonishing number to me is the number of drivers that to this date are still in prohibited status, meaning they cannot operate a commercial motor vehicle because they have not gone through the return to duty process that's necessary to get back to work after a failed drug or alcohol test or other violation. And of that 263,000 drivers that have been reported to the Clearinghouse, 177,092 drivers remain in prohibited status. So there are over 177,000 CDL drivers out there that are currently prohibited from operating a commercial motor vehicle due to one of these violations. Every one of those 177,000 drivers is also going to lose their CDL come November 18th if they haven't already lost it because of those violations. Just crazy numbers.
Yeah, they're insane numbers. And I don't know if you have the other chart there that shows that obviously marijuana is just such a huge issue in the way of, and I don't think we can preach this enough, is the CBD world is unregulated.
Yeah.
And they can say all they want. Oh, there's no THC. There's, that's the stuff that's where the test becomes positive, is when there's THC.
Yeah. Yeah, you can
And
see from this chart that marijuana far and away, not surprising, but for the 5-panel test that we do for DOT drug testing, marijuana far and away the most common contributor to a failed drug test, followed by cocaine and then methamphetamines and that type of stuff. But yeah, you're right. You're exactly right, Brian. One of the big contributors nowadays to failed marijuana test is a misunderstanding of the interaction of state and federal law when it comes to marijuana legalization. What you need to know if you're a regulated driver or a fleet is that the federal DOT, the FMCSA, they don't care whether marijuana is legal in a particular driver's state. It is unlawful for interstate regulated drivers to use marijuana, even if that marijuana is legal in their state, even if they have been prescribed that marijuana by a doctor. If they test positive for marijuana, which they're going to do if they're using marijuana for any reason, then DOT doesn't care. That driver is now in prohibited status and will have to go through the return to duty status. So if you are a regulated driver, we cannot stress it enough. You cannot be using marijuana, even if it's legal in your state. But a related point that you mentioned, Brian, which is CBD use, also another gray area. CBD is, as I understand it, legal in all 50 states. But the problem is that there is little to no regulation on the manufacturers of CBD when it comes to the representations they make on the labeling of the packages for that product. And so what you'll see is a lot of manufacturers representing on the packaging that their CBD product contains little to no THC, which is the psychoactive compound that creates the high effect. That's the one that we're testing for when we do marijuana test. And it turns out that a lot of those representations are false. And so regulated drivers are taking the CBD substances, relying on the manufacturer's representations that it contains no THC, and then they pop positive on a drug test. And again, the DOT doesn't care if that's the reason for the positive. If you get a positive marijuana test, you are out of the driving seat until you go through the return to duty process, which involves seeing a substance abuse professional, going through an education program, passing a return to duty test, being subject to a follow-up testing schedule. There's a lot that goes into it. And a lot of trucking companies don't even hire drivers that have had previously tested positive. So long story short here, marijuana use among commercial drivers is a no-go for right now. And CBD use, in my opinion, my recommendation to every fleet and to every regulated driver that I talk to, too risky right now to even be using CBD products unless and until we get tighter regulation on the manufacturers of that product to cut down on the misrepresentations on their labeling.
Yeah, it used to be that the biggest problem that we had when it came to failed drug tests was the guy that hurt his back doing yard work and just happened to have, the missus had an oxy or something for some reason, and he took one and went to bed, and then obviously tested 2 days later and tested positive. But the marijuana side of it now is just so out of control, and I think so much of it is misunderstanding, or the thought of it's legal here, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And it's just going to continue to carry on. I don't really know what other messaging we can put out there
Oh,
other
yeah.
than just stop it.
Yeah, we've been preaching that message for several years now, and a lot of carriers and drivers just haven't gotten the message. So hopefully they do. Matt here is asking, is there any effect on a driver's Class D, so their standard operator's license, if their CDL, Class A or otherwise, is downgraded or suspended once November 18th comes around and RMVs, DMVs are actively cooperating with the clearinghouse? Any effect on the operator's license if the driver's in prohibited status? You're shaking your head no, Brian. Yeah, there shouldn't be any impact on the driver's operator's license. They should be left with a valid standard operator's license to operate passenger vehicles, assuming there's not some other reason for that to be downgraded. But the caution I'll give to you, to all fleets, is that just because they have a valid operator's license doesn't mean that they're qualified to operate smaller vehicles, non-CDL vehicles for you. In fact, by virtue of them being in prohibited status, remember that if a driver's put in prohibited status in the clearinghouse, that means they're prohibited from performing safety-sensitive functions. That term obviously covers the operation of CDL-sized vehicles, but if you look at the regulation, it also prohibits the operation of non-CDL vehicles in commerce, so small vehicles as well. So even if a driver has a valid operator's license, if you're a carrier that's looking to hire one of these drivers to operate a non-CDL vehicle, that would be a violation for you to hire them being in prohibited status to operate a non-CDL vehicle for you, because it's that's prohibited as well. That would be the performance of a safety-sensitive function. So be on the lookout for that.
I think the difference there would be if they were caught roadside operating under the influence. That would change whether a Class D license
you're right.
be allowed. So, if they're caught red-handed, so to speak, on roadside because they were all over the road and they did the field sobriety, then yes, the Class D would be affected too.
You're right. If a DUI was what caused the prohibited status in the clearinghouse, then they're going to lose both licenses as a result of that. But that's not going to, that would have already happened. It's not like November 18th is going to change that. They should have already lost both licenses, depending on how their particular state handles DUIs. Some of them, we learned this in the boot camp, talking with fleets from all over the country. Some were situated in states who don't automatically suspend a driver's operator's license when they get a DUI. There's a period of time where they're able to continue driving until they actually adjudicate the DUI. But in other states, they automatically suspend the driver's operator's license. So yeah, DUIs are a different beast when it comes to the status of a driver's license, for sure. All right. So again, the caution here is November 18th. Fleets and drivers, be aware that effective that date, state driver's licensing agencies are going to take action to downgrade CDLs of any driver, those 177,000 drivers that are in prohibited status in the clearinghouse, meaning they will no longer have CDLs unless and until they go through the return to duty process. And also any new driver who is looking to either get a CDL for the first time or maybe upgrade an existing CDL, now state driver's licensing agencies effective November 18th are going to have to query the clearinghouse before going through with those transactions. And if they see that the driver's in prohibited status, then they're not allowed to proceed with those types of transactions. The driver will not be able to get a new CDL, or more commonly, they would not be able to upgrade an existing CDL. So long story short, CDL transactions or CDLs are not going to be a thing for drivers in prohibited status. So just be aware of that. If you are a driver that needs to get back to work following one of these violations, I'd encourage you to read up on the return to duty process. We have a whole article and video on the topic on our YouTube channel and on our website, trucksafe.com, that kind of walks through the exact process you have to go through to return to duty. So to check that out, and just be aware, that there are, like I said earlier, a lot of fleets in the country that just have a matter of company policy that they do not hire drivers who have previously tested positive or have otherwise violated the drug and alcohol testing rules. So your pool of potential employers is going to be pretty small, I fear, unfortunately. So any closing thoughts on that, Brian? We're about out of time here.
No, I think you nailed it. It's just not worth it. I mean, I know that sounds so cliche, and we hear people saying it all the time, but it is just not worth it to do any of that stuff. The oils, the lotions, any of that stuff. It's not worth trying to circumvent the system because you're probably not going to do it.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's going to wrap up topic for today. Appreciate everybody joining us today. Make sure to follow us on social media if you're not already. We're on all the social media, Facebook, Twitter, X, YouTube. That's the best way to stay up to date with us. Also, like I said, subscribe to our newsletter over at trucksafe.com/subscribe. And we regularly send out detailed articles all about these types of topics, and we're regularly pushing out videos on these types of topics. So that's the best way to keep up to date. Also, stay tuned for our next episode of TruckSafe Live. Visit trucksafelive.com for details and to read guest bios and to watch past episodes. You can also subscribe to the podcast wherever you happen to get your podcast. That's all I got. Anything else, Brian?
I'm good.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you later. See ya.